All right, today on the Vinyl Guide podcast, we are stoked to have Mr. Ben Blackwell of Third Man Records. However, I must acknowledge Ben wears many, many hats. He's also owner, manager of Cass Records, a label that specializes in 7 inches. He's the official archivist of the White Stripes. His title at Third Man is Pinball Wizard and Director of Operations, and he still somehow finds time to occasionally play the drums. Ben, when did you decide that music and records were going to be more than just a hobby?
Well, I think the moment that I was given the vision that it could be,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of in my life, you are interested in music, or I don't know. I'm saying you. I was interested in music, and I was interested in things like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and rock and roll with a kind of a punk leaning. But I just thought that was, that was like trying to go to the moon. It wasn't within your grasp. And so when I became aware of things happening on a local level and DIY, and the fact that, you can just, run a record label from your house, and you can just be a band. You and your buddy, you could just play guitar and drums together. You don't have to have a bass player and a keyboard player and all of that stuff. When I started to realize there weren't rules, it seemed pretty clear, like, well, shit, I can do whatever I want. You can do whatever you want, and it's art, and it's a label, and you can exist in your own terms. That's probably like around 15 or 16 when the first seeds are planted, and I still have bits of that feeling that hit me every now and again. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't need to be 100%, a professional with a license and how to put out a chat book or how to, do anything. The DIY aspect has always been really, really motivational to me.
You seem to gravitate towards 7 inches quite a bit. Was that a seed that was planted in your youth as just a record listener?
Yeah, I guess it probably comes from my initial early infatuation with Sub Pop. They're probably, 5-7 inches for every 12-inch they put out in the era that I was kind of focusing on. But a 7-inch just seems so perfect, both from a creative standpoint and a business standpoint, like a label. Once you get to an LP, there's all kinds of expectations, and there's so much more effort that needs to be put into it. A 7-inch it's all baked in. It's all there. It's really hard to fuck up a 7-inch. If you can't do a good 7-inch, you clearly shouldn't be doing an LP. The inverse is not true.
I guess that's true because you with a band or a bunch of mates can bang out a 7-inch over a weekend, but an album takes much longer, much more organization, and much more. The logistics to pull that together are much greater.
Absolutely, 7-inch is kind of like, yeah, we recorded a 7-inch and we self-released it, and yeah, we sold 200 copies. Okay, great. That's totally within the realm of reasonable expectations for a 7-inch. Even if it's the greatest 7-inch in the world. For an LP, you could say the same thing. Like, yeah, we recorded an LP and we put it out and we sold 200 copies. And it's like, man, why'd you only sell 200 copies? What went wrong? Why didn't you do promotion and publicity? And did you send it to radio stations? And did you go on tour? All these other things are, expected of an LP. The 7-inch is its own thing, and it can exist on its own without any story needing to be attached to it.
Nowadays, people are, pulling out their record players, and it's a little bit more common than it was, say, 10 years ago. How was that conversion for you to be able to sell a record to an audience who probably a fraction of them had a working record player at home?
It's weird when I think about, record sales. On one end, we talk about how vinyl sales are increasing, whatever, 40% year over year, whatever number. I hear a different number every day. But when I think back to running my record label, Cass Records, when I started in 2003, I could take two relatively kind of medium level bands and easily sell 1,000 copies of 7 inches by them. Whereas now I would probably be lucky to easily sell 300 copies of those same 7 inches. The first 2 7 inches I did were a band called the Mooney Suzuki and a band called the Cyril Lords. And I sold 1,000 copies of those within, probably a year of those being out. So on one level, I think, bigger artists and name artists are selling more vinyl than they have in 30 years. But underground artists, it's that much more of a struggle for them to actually make an impact in some weird way. I don't know why that is.
Is it maybe there's so much more product out there these days? More people are pressing records than were 10 years ago?
There definitely is that, and it's definitely not as accessible. Production capacity is at a premium. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of there's much more choice in terms of independent, DIY, self-released underground stuff. There's a lot more people are conversant in vinyl at this point.
Now, and due to that, I guess, let's call it a slowdown in that market or that area. Have you found yourself being more selective about what you put out? Has it slowed down your roster of releases?
On the personal level, what slowed me down is the fact I'm 34 and slightly more out of touch than I've ever been in my life.
Wait till you get to 46. That's
Yeah, no, exactly. 34 with a 3-year-old daughter and another one due to be born any minute now. Someone asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, what new bands are you digging in Nashville?" I'm like, "You are asking the wrong guy." But I'm not claiming to be knowing what the newest hippest thing is or what on top of all of that. If you want to have a conversation about, hey, what undiscovered bands from Michigan in the 1970s are ripe to put out on vinyl, I could list you 5 different things. My interest and my focus has kind of just veered a little bit. That's all.
Ask me about the best children's car seats, and I can tell you that. So in terms of kind of what you're doing now, and you have multiple areas that you're involved in, and Cass Records. If people want to check out the roster, it's at cassrecords.com, CASS records.com. Let's talk a little bit about Third Man. Now, I think there's the vision that it's a bit of a Willy Wonka chocolate factory over there, and you guys are really living the dream. What are the roles and the duties? What's the daily life of the pinball wizard and director of operations?
Increasingly trying to be more proactive versus reactive. So I could very easily sit at my desk all day and just respond to emails. And business would go on, everything would be fine. But it makes it harder to look further ahead, to tell you what we're doing 6 months from now. So I'm trying to be more in that realm. That means, handing off responsibilities that used to be solely on my shoulders, which is a lot of manufacturing and distribution. So I still kind of oversee the bulk of our manufacturing, but I'm not necessarily the day-to-day to be able to tell you exactly how many copies of the new live Autolux record have pressed up to this point. I know that it's pressed, and I know it's going to make its release date in 2 weeks. That's the main information I need to know. And I've got someone else that I can charge with making sure all the other details are met and guidelines and deadlines and things of that nature.
So if a pressing machine goes offline, breaks or something like that, do you get a call, or you got people that just deal with that?
In regards to the United Record Pressing, which is the plant that we primarily employ at this moment, I won't get a call. At the moment when our presses are up and running in Detroit at our factory, I hope it's at a level where I do not need to be notified.
And when is the Detroit pressing plant coming online?
So we've got the presses have arrived. That was a big wait for us to get them to actually arrive, and they're being put into place probably as I am speaking to you right now. I know I've seen a photograph of one press in the spot that it will live in. So that's a process to get there, but it's coming together surely enough.
So will the first record roll off the press in 2017?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that is a fair assessment.
Big ribbon cutting ceremony and everything.
I hope so. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, speaking just quickly of the pressing plant in Detroit, that's going to be for Third Man plus other people to be able to access the services and to be able to order their records pressed as well. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How will that differ from some of the other pressing plants like United or Rainbow or that lot?
Opening a pressing plant, a new pressing plant, is not as unheard of as a lot of people may think. I just got word today that there's a plant opening up in Miami, probably within the next month or two. And there's smaller concerns have been opened in Portland and in New Hampshire or Vermont, one of those New England states. I can't remember which. So a pressing plant in and of itself is not that big of a revolutionary idea. I think what we're getting back towards as an industry is more of local specialized plants where, Third Man, I don't think when we're up and running, I'm not going to get the order for the next Adele record. The major labels are going to use the big three that they're kind of used to using, which are their URP, their RTI, their Rainbow, things of that nature. But we're going to make a significant dent in the independent small label artists that are self-releasing. We'll be significant in that world, or we'll be able to help folks not be bogged down by a 4-month turnaround time.
Yeah, you're not going to you're not aiming to be a supermarket. You're looking to be one of the best delis in the neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how difficult is it these
days?
Wait,
did I just commit to selling cured meats instead of pressing records?
Yes, absolutely. So I would like to have 1,012 inches and some Parmesan.
Exactly. That sounds delicious right about.
Edible records. That's something that Third Man has never done.
We've got ideas.
When it comes to actually ordering record presses, are you using old school ones or are you using modern presses?
These are modern presses. These are new. There's a company in Germany called New Built, and these are presses manufactured by them. And so I don't know how deep you go, but they're based on the framework of the classic fine built press, which is has a book mold, and it is a manual press. So it's not automated, and that gives you a little bit more opportunity for manipulation. So a lot of our what we deal with at United is when we're trying to come up with interesting vinyl setup or configurations, colors, splatters, whatever you want to call it. A lot of the time we've been hamstrung by the fact that all of their machines, save for one 7-inch machine, all their machines are automatic. And that gives you very little room to play around and to experiment. Mm. Whereas when you have a manual machine, you can do things like a tricolor or a splatter or different, all kinds of different configurations. And so what my hope is to do is to still have URP on hand to do our big press it, our big run. So, Jack White acoustic LP is a perfect example. My initial order for that was a 6-figure order. I'm not under the delusion that I'll be able to do that many pieces out of the Detroit plant. It just doesn't make sense. But I would love if I was doing the limited edition colored vinyl of maybe couple hundred copies in Detroit, in conjunction with United doing the big black vinyl mass market run.
So when it came to an LP like the Jack White, the Lazaretto, the Ultra LP, which had so many interesting features, and it really kind of pushed the edge of what could be the possibility of a 12-inch vinyl record. Did you need special pressing equipment to be able to do that?
No, not at all. Everything that was done on that record was all done in the mastering metal plating phase. So by the time we got to actual manufacture and pressing, we just all the work had been done on the plates, and we just put them in it. You could put them in any press. It wasn't specific to United or anything like that. So that was the kind of beautiful part of it. The packaging, the jacket packaging, and the record itself were all easily done on just the standard operation. So at one point, I believe we had Lazaretto on. I think we had it on 4 different presses at United at one point when the demand was super, super high. My initial order on that was 100,000 copies. And I think we had it pressing for 6 or 7 consecutive weeks without ever coming off completely off presses. And that was just unheard of at the time. Now I think it's not that crazy unheard of, which is great for everyone. I'm happy to be at that point.
So even the songs that were under the label, that was not a custom thing where the machine had to have particular parts to do that. That was all on the lacquer master.
Absolutely.
With all those moving parts on the lacquer master, how pensive were people in just dealing with that, creating that single unit, that single master?
It was really, really difficult to get to that point. The biggest challenge was really the parallel grooves that start off side B.
Yeah.
So depending on where you drop the needle, you either got an acoustic or electric intro to the song Just One Drink. And that, without exaggeration, our mastering engineer said it took 24 hours to do that. Because it's not a thing that you can chalk up to a computer figuring it out. And you're basically working on instinct, eyeball, and a lot of luck. Our mastering engineer, George Ingram, pardon my French, but he said it was trying to take a flying fuck at a donut was the equivalent of trying to get those grooves to line up. Because no one had ever really done that before. They had done parallel grooves that joined together, but they'd never done it so that they joined together at a common point. So the first half of the song, depending on where you drop the needle, it's either acoustic or electric, but they join together at the chorus so that the rest of the song is the electric, no matter where you started. And so you're trying to hit both of the grooves on the beat, which is not something you ever really have to do in vinyl mastering. You're not looking to time a beat or anything like that unless you're really, really specific in regards to a locked groove. But even with locked grooves, people have written computer programs where you can get a locked groove to play exactly to your specification. This is something completely different. You're working on a finite amount of space and all of that.
So just kind of pulling it apart, working backwards, he would have had to do the full version of it, leaving the full version of the lacquer master of the song, leaving room for that additional intro, and then determining where to start the cut and exactly the moment of when to stop the cut to then converge onto that microscopic single groove on the beat.
Absolutely.
Oy, yeah. And I'm surprised it only took 24 hours. So, but that was just kind of one part. So if he got that right, but then screwed up something like the angel artwork or something like that, he would have had to start all the way over.
Well, the angel is the angel on the A side or the B side? I'm trying to recall. I think the angel's on the A side. So we're dealing with 2 different masters at that point, thankfully. But even so, with 100,000 initial order, we got to the point where we had one. We had the one master, and that's great. But something that we don't deal with very often, because we don't often have 100,000 order, is the metal parts start to wear out. You have one master, and you can make you have one lacquer, and you can make a finite number of masters off of that, and you can make a finite number of mothers and a finite number of plates off of that. And so when we're getting to like 95,000, the plant is telling me like, hey, we're going to need another cut of this. And my initial thought is, oh shit, we got to do all of that over again. We got to cut the dual groove, but we also have to etch the hologram again. And we had this really, really amazing thing where the etching on the dual groove on the second press, I guess you'd call it, the second master, is actually better than the first. It actually timed even better the second time. So I'm sure there's some sort of designation between first pressing or second pressing. It might be just a -2 in the runout etching, but yeah, it got better, thankfully.
That was an incredible package. And I'm assuming that you guys have thoughts in mind about how to take that even to another level on the next one?
I don't know. The goal of that was to just throw everything in the kitchen sink in terms of tricks and gimmicks into an LP, and I don't think we could ever top that in terms of wow factor. So it might have to be the complete opposite of just completely straightforward, no gimmick, just a record.
The anti-gimmick.
Exactly. We've gone so far that we have to pull back.
When I hold a third man album like Blunderbuss, it feels a little bit different. There's a little bit of a different weight to it, it seems. Perhaps a bit of a different composition. Am I crazy, or is there actually a difference between those records and some of the other ones I'd have?
Are you talking just the disc itself?
The disc itself, yeah.
Nothing different. Maybe what you're sensing is that we just care more, and that comes through.
It's the love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, being the pinball wizard and director of operations, do you get involved when someone says, "Oh, Beck is in town, and he'd like to swing by and record in the Blue Room"? Do you manage that, or is that a different end of the business?
Different artists and different projects, I will have different levels of involvement, kind of based on just who's probably less busy at the time and who may already have relationships with management or the artist itself. So when we did the Beck record, that mostly just kind of came through Jack and Beck being friends. So it wasn't too much that needed to be really shepherded on my end. He came in and I gave him a tour. And I think I first met him 2002 or so. So we knew each other, and he's very nice. And so that's that kind of exists in that world.
Sure. I pulled him as an example, but when an artist comes into town, they'll say, "Oh, so-and-so's here. We want to get him in." Like how often does that happen? How many times a month does an artist come in and play in the Blue Room and do that whole bit?
On average, probably once a month, we will have something going on in the Blue Room. We've been we've gone a little harder lately, maybe a minimum of 2, sometimes 4 events a month. So yeah, and the answer is the same, that kind of can fall to a number of different people in terms of, all right, who's going to set up load in time, who's going to engineer the session. We kind of just have different point people. No one person is just like, okay, I handle live records, that's all I do. Everyone does a little bit of everything here.
One thing that's also very apparent about Third Man is there seems to be a very familiar, consistent design ethic, I guess. Do you have the same colors, very similar logos and lettering? Do you have an in-house designer oversees those sort of tactile elements?
We've got 4 full-time in-house designers who are working on everything with any visual design element to it. So concert posters, album covers, T-shirt designs, website, bin divider cards in the record store, all the way to, we've got billboards for Jack White acoustic LP that were designed here in-house. So they are well-versed in the Third Man style guide and rule book. And all of them have college degrees. which I can't say about any other department here at Third Man. So,
is there any training for running a record press, or you just got to roll up your sleeves and trial and error?
For running a record press, yes, you need to be trained. You need to have some sort of mechanical know-how. For running a record label, no, there's no real training. You kind of just figure it out. I mean, my training was I started my own record label for fun, and I ran my own record label in my bedroom for 7 years or whatever it was, with no intention of making money off of it, or it was a career or whatever. I loved the idea of manufacturing a 7-inch 45 and in distributing it via mail order. I thought that was so fun, and I thought it was kind of beautiful that we're relying upon this clearly antiquated system. The United States Postal Service is by no means the most efficient way to disseminate music, but it's what spoke to me. I had this romantic view of the mail. So I did that for years and years, until the point where Jack called me and said, "Hey, I want to start up Third Man. You've spent the past 5 years figuring out how vinyl works and how a record label runs. I want you to helm that portion of it." I was like, wow, I just turned my hobby into my career. I thank my stars every day to be doing something I love.
That's a good trick. Look, and it's the, it goes back to the saying, if you do what you love, it won't seem like work, but also you become really proficient at it. And opportunities do make themselves available, and you just got to be ready for them.
Absolutely. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
And one of the things interesting about Third Man is there's a lot of runs that are like 100 of one color or something, very limited runs, which drives up the collector market, drives up the value of that. What do you think when you see a Third Man record out there on eBay selling for $1,000 or more?
I think I've done my job. I think that, I come at all of this as a record collector. So for me, there was excitement. Up on my wall right now, I have framed a poster of the first 370 some releases that Sub Pop ever did. And I bought that poster from Sub Pop mail order when I was 15 years old. And I looked at it and I thought, I'm going to get every one of these records. Now, this is just before the dawn of eBay. I'm basically relying on whatever used record stores I could get my parents to drive me to at that point. Mm-hmm. But I have a mental, note on what each of these releases, Singles Club, limited edition, maybe some of them were only on CD at that point, and I'm going to try to find all of them. The fun part was the hunt. It wasn't the records that you found instantly right away. Those are the ones you ended up caring the least about. When I finally got a copy of Nirvana's Love Buzz single, it was literally a moment where I felt I never thought this moment was going to come. I never thought I was going to be able to own this record. And I bought a copy in 2000 with money I got from my high school graduation. I paid $500 for that single, and people told me I was crazy for spending that much money on a record. Now I think you probably can't get in the game for anything less than $1,500 on that single, and I don't regret it at all. I've got it. I've since then have bought or I didn't even buy it. I traded for a test pressing of that record. So I've only gone deeper down the rabbit hole. So what I'm saying is, if you're a record collector and you like collecting records, we're going to make you really, really jump through hoops to play that game with Third Man releases and Third Man product. So that's why you have limited editions of 100, or we've got secret releases people don't even know anything about. We also understand that a lot of people don't give a shit about the colored vinyl variations or different packaging or whatever, trick something's gussied up in. And for those people, we say every single one of our releases is available on standard black vinyl from our website to any customer, to any store that wants to buy it. They will never go out of print. So I think we better than any label out there completely satiate the needs of the music fan and also cater towards record collectors. I don't think it could be done any better. I really don't.
Well, you guys certainly have raised the bar in that regard and making some records not only rare but almost impossible to even know where to start trying to find one. An example of that is the records. I don't know what it was, but apparently one of the distributions that you guys did were to release 7-inch singles with helium balloons.
Yeah, of course.
Why wouldn't? What was that conversation like when that idea was pitched?
That is, I have to say, is 100% totally my idea. And I'm not trying to be a credit whore or anything like that, but it was so personal and so, I saw that through every step of the way that I'm just so proud of that one that I have to put that out there. But it was, we'd finally found it was just as Pirates Press had made flexi discs available after you hadn't been able to press flexis for a couple of years, maybe 6 or 7 years. And they had reintroduced the flexi process. And so that was kind of always I had the idea of releasing records via balloon, but it didn't really make sense on vinyl because it was so expensive for the vinyl, and then it was also so heavy.
It was the weight, yeah.
But when they were available, I said, this is the lead up to the release of Blunderbuss, Jack's first solo album, and so people were very anxious to hear anything from it. So I said, how about we take an album track and we press it on flexi disc, and the only way you can get that flexi disc is this balloon. And that conversation with Jack was just like, yeah, do it. It's a great idea. That was it. There was no discussion of budget. There was no, how are we going to market this or how are we going to publicize it? It was just the idea, you ride the line between gimmick and performance art and record release. And it has a little bits of all of that tied in. And it becomes, the idea stems from when I was a kid at my school, we would do balloon launches every year where everyone in the school has a balloon and you write a postcard, you self-address a postcard to yourself with a stamp already on it. And they do a big countdown and everyone in the school goes out in the parking lot and releases their balloons. And for the rest of the year, the principal would read on the morning announcements whatever postcards had come back and say, oh, this one was found in Southern Ohio. And this one was found in a lot of ours, because of where we were situated, a lot of our balloons were found in Canada because we were right across the river in Detroit. But I remember one, it still sticks in my head, that the principal said that one had come in from, it was either Vermont or New Hampshire, which is so far away from Detroit. And I think that's so, again, it ties to my fascination with the postal system and mail order, the fact that we're letting wind patterns dictate where these things end up. I just thought there's sometimes to
it's a bit romantic, I think, I mean,
absolutely. I saw a video yesterday of a band. I think it was the list of the 10 most outrageous records released or packaging ideas or something like that. And it was this band Blood Duster from Australia. And it's a video where they're cutting the vinyl master and they do the lockout groove, and you can see them inscribe the runout etchings on the vinyl master. And then they say, okay, now for the fun part. And they take a metal carving bit and they start drawing pentagrams in the master of the record and scratching it so that every groove is defaced. And I think they kind of autograph it or something in this manner. And then they sent that off to be plated and pressed. And I think they made like 100 copies of it, but every single copy was unplayable, and they destroyed the master. And I think there weren't even CD copies available. So every copy of that record is completely unplayable. I think there's something amazing about that. There's something, when you're making art, it doesn't necessarily always need to be the end experience of a listener sitting down at their record player does not always need to be the final consideration. I think the consideration needs to be, what are you creating and why are you creating it? And maybe you're making art for yourself, and it's not necessarily to be enjoyed by someone that wants to pay $10 for your record or whatever. I like the idea of things being absurd. I like the idea of fucking with people. I really do.
Fair enough. No, I tend to think that if you are a fan or a follower of an artist or entity of some sort, you have to take their output on its face value. It's their work. It's not always necessarily for you for a particular purpose. It could be just to provoke thought.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. So I did a record on Cass where the band I play in, the Dirt Bombs, we did I think it was a 20-minute long, all synthesizer extemporaneous noise piece. And we did an edited version of that, ended up on our record called They Have Us Surrounded, or We Have You Surrounded. And the 20-minute version I pressed on a limited edition 12-inch single, 500 copies. And I think it was, $20 to buy it. And as soon as I was sold out of that record, I posted a thing on my website, sent out a email blast saying, okay, for all the folks that bought the Dirt Bombs 12-inch record, we have a new offering, which is there's a Dirt Bomb single of two covers of this Australian garage artist named Ray Columbus, a song called Kick Me and a song called The Crunch, that were supposed to be released as part of a New Zealand tour single that never happened. But these are songs with choruses and melodies and actual singing on them. I think I pressed 200 copies of that 7-inch on colored vinyl. The only way you could get that 7-inch was to mail me back a completely destroyed copy of the Race to the Bottom was the name of the 12-inch noise song. Send me a completely destroyed copy of the Race to the Bottom 12-inch. So it had to be rendered unplayable. So the thought I'm looking to provoke is, what is your connection to this as a consumer, as a fan? Do you want to own the record to put it on your shelf and say, I have a complete Dirt Bombs collection? Or do you buy records because you actually enjoy music? And you know what? I don't like this just noise crap. I'll gladly send it in exchange for a 7-inch of playable songs. And I think I got maybe about 100 people sent in destroyed records ultimately. And I kind of flew by the seat of my pants. And when I got ready to send the records out, I realized, oh shit, like I'm not making any money on this. Like I really hadn't thought about that I pressed all these records and I'd not considered that this was just kind of giving money away. So what I did was all the 7-inches were pressed with UK style center holes, which means like you can punch it out if you're familiar.
Yeah, punch outs.
So what I did was I put one copy on eBay with the punch out intact. And I said, this is the only copy that will ever be publicly made available with the center intact. Anyone who participated in the trade-in program will receive a copy that has the center punched out. And I think that copy on eBay sold for $300 or $350. And then I think there was a second chance offer. The second highest bidder made a request or something like that. And so I believe I sold 2 copies of the record at hyperinflated prices to super collectors. And those 2 copies paid for the entire pressing.
So it really is like a social experiment that you're doing.
Absolutely. And are you aware of the triple-decker record that we did here at Third Man?
Please explain.
So the triple-decker record is basically a 7-inch single sealed inside of a 12-inch record. And it's all glued shut, super glued shut. And the only way you can hear the music on the 7-inch is to rip open the 12-inch and basically destroy the 12-inch. And so I think we did this after the Race to the Bottom trade-in fiasco. I say fiasco. No, I think it was completely successful on my end. No fiasco at all. But the idea was, again, why do you collect records? Do you want to put this triple decker that looks very pretty? Do you want to put it on your wall? Or do you want to be able to hear the music, which was two, at that time, unheard songs by the Dead Weather that you couldn't hear anywhere else? And a very, very small portion of people actually cracked that record open. I would say maybe 15 or 20% of the people cracked it open. So you get a little bit of insight in that.
That sounds like it's like a dream factory. You guys have just these different ideas that keep coming up, and why don't we do this? What ideas get rejected? Give us an example of something that may have gotten rejected and why.
I mean, I can't think of any like innovative ideas or advances that have specifically been rejected. It's more so it can't be done or it just doesn't work. I'm hard pressed. It's more likely, we try to do a live to acetate recording of the Breeders and it just doesn't work out. It's very seldom. No, we're not going to do that.
So it all kind of comes down to logistics. It's a good idea, but if it can't be executed, then put it aside.
Absolutely.
Some of the other things that you guys have done around like the RPMs, I think you guys did a 3 RPM record.
Yes, we absolutely did.
Would you guys do a wax cylinder or an 8-track at any point?
I don't think it's out of the question. It's just to find a way that makes sense to do it, that's interesting, that we think is interesting. We're not, vinyl is the perfect way for us to say we're not format snobs. We're totally fine making our stuff available digitally, streaming and download, and putting out CDs as well. We're not trying to say you have to listen to this way. It's just if there's a way that speaks to us to do a wax cylinder, to do an 8-track, we just have to find that.
The right purpose, the right vehicle, and have it all kind of come together.
Absolutely.
So let's talk really quick about reissues, because you guys are not only doing new artists, but you've gone back and you've remastered and reissued really legendary recordings. Charlie Patton, the Paramount catalog. Tell us about the restoration process and how you get those old recordings into new packages.
A lot of the restoration on that goes to a gentleman by the name of Chris King, who's kind of dedicated his life to the bulk of music from that era. And I can't speak specifically to the exact science behind it all. All I know is that he does a very impressive job across. He was our main guy for the Paramount sets, and a lot of that stuff had, by the time you figure in everything that was included, digitally, we're talking about 800 tracks per set. So that's 1,600 tracks, a lot of which had never been available digitally ever before. So at that point, you're also working with material where even a pristine, unplayed original copy of these records would sound pretty crappy, given the formulas for raw material that Paramount was employing oftentimes included organic detritus of, beetle shells or whatever was lying around in Grafton, Wisconsin. So it's a challenge all the way around, but I think the people that get it can see through it. If you have someone complaining about the audio quality, you kind of feel like they're not really, they're missing the point.
Yeah, that dust and that debris is part of the experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in order to be able to restore that, you just got a hold of all those different recordings, because a lot of them, Paramount's, there may only be 1 or 2 of some of these recordings left. So,
absolutely.
So
yeah, it was a process where Chris King and Dean Blackwood, who's one of the producers of the set in conjunction with Alex Vandertook, who was, I think, probably the preeminent Paramount expert in the world. Those guys kind of going through the underground, overground collectors network and knowing, oh, so-and-so has a copy of this Paramount. Let me get a hold of them. Hopefully they'll send me a copy. They'll send me the actual disc and we can do it. And if they're not comfortable doing that, they can work on a transfer from their end and I can give them specs and I can, manipulate the digital file that they send me, things like that. But yeah, it was a long process. Each one of those boxes took, we were working for a year up to the release of it to get everything together and manufactured and figured out.
And it sounds like a huge investment to be able to do all that to what is potentially a very limited market. Has that been a successful package for you guys?
I think it's an unqualified success in terms of, each of those sets won Grammy Awards. Each of those sets stand alone. We literally had a discussion here prior to the release where we came up with the thought that, we really are doing a disservice if we call these box sets, because box sets kind of presupposes a lot of things and tries to fit into a mold that people have probably already predetermined in their head. These kind of shatter the mold of a box set. And when you have a wooden, these are 18 and 20 pounds each or something like that, a wooden box and a molded metal, almost looks like a Halliburton flight case, not a thing that's going to be housing vinyl records. The idea being, how far can we push this? What would Paramount have done in their day if they actually had the money or actually gave a shit? What would something from the teens look like versus something from the late 20s? What's the difference between arts and crafts style versus Art Deco style? These clear stylistic delineations. All of that stuff. Those were all conversations that led into where these ultimately ended up.
Really quick, let's talk about one of the other hats that you wear, which is the official archivist of the White Stripes.
Yeah.
Now, how does that work? What are the duties of the official archivist?
I guess it's hard to claim official duties. It's more things come up and they just get passed along to me.
Okay.
So when
you're the go-to guy.
Yeah. So when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wants to display the outfit that Meg White wore on the cover of Icky Thump and her peppermint white pearl export bass drum, they come to me to figure it out. And, I know where it is and I know where the stuff is and I know what all is necessary to be included. Or when someone says, maybe the management office calls and say, hey, do you know what the copyright year is on the White Stripes Let's Shake Hands single? I get asked, it's kind of, I kind of just fell into the position because I've been here since day one. I've been working for the White Stripes since they started 20 years ago now, almost. So it's not a matter of I have any training in archiving or library science. It's just when you're around so long, you're the person that has the answers to the questions.
You've accumulated the knowledge, so you would know, okay, well, this particular outfit or this particular show was where this event happened.
Absolutely.
Do you keep records of that? Is there like not to get too dorky, but do you have a bit of a database that says, I know, on May 1st of 1996, I could quickly look up they were in Finland, something like that?
I have, in terms of databases, I've got a list of every show they ever played with who the openers were. The date and the city and the club name. But a lot of that, I had someone in yesterday or talking. I said, when was the first time you saw the White Stripes? And they said, I saw them at the Warfield in San Francisco. I said, oh, that's April 2003. And I just know because I think from memory, I think they only played the Warfield that time. If he said, I saw him in San Francisco, I'd say, well, did you see him at the bottom of the hill? Or did you see him at the Greek Theater over in Berkeley? Like where, I can figure all this out. And most of it is because I can tie it to my own personal experiences or remembrances of these things. I wasn't at the Warfield show, but I remember they played the Warfield right after Elephant came out. Elephant came out in 2003, April 1st, 2003. So I can narrow this down just from that sort of deduction.
And do you keep copies of like the audio or any video from any of the shows? Like that's all sorted and filed somewhere?
Yeah, we've got a large collection of soundboard audio going back to, when it was just me, Jack, and Meg in a, Ford Taurus driving around the Midwest, where I would just have a backpack full of blank tapes and shyly walk up to the sound man and asking if he could run one. All the way through by 2003, the band was traveling with I think the recording process or unit was called a radar drive or radar system. And they were recording digital multi-track hard drives of basically every show. So when you go back and you look through the Third Man Records Vault subscription service, you can see we did White Stripes live in Japan. So the first two times the White Stripes played in Japan in 2000, we had cassettes of those two shows, and that's what we worked from. Whereas when we did the White Stripes live in Chicago 2003, I have a hard drive of that. I can get that mixed anew, and it sounds amazing. And kind of those are the different realms that we have to work from.
If you see
and everywhere in between.
If you see something online, like somebody uploads a video they took at an old show on YouTube, do you download that and help make that part of your collection?
Not specifically. But I guess I probably could. And how much things, once something's on YouTube, that's I'm under the impression, whether wrongly or rightly, once something's on YouTube, there's a copy somewhere else if I don't have it.
What do you think is the biggest threat to the music industry right now?
That's a really good question, which is my response to try and buy time usually. I think, the biggest threat to the music industry, I think, is getting people to actually understand that they should be paying in some form or another for music, whether it's a streaming subscription, whether it's, actually buying an LP at a merch table or a record store. And even me as someone who spends, no exaggeration, tens of thousands of dollars on records every year. If I wanted to, yesterday I wanted to listen to a song by the Walkmen. They covered Fly Into the Mystery by the Modern Lovers. And I wanted to listen to that. So the first thing I do is I just go to YouTube and type in Walkmen Fly Into the Mystery, and I listen to that. I own a copy of that record, probably across a format or two. And the interesting part is I just go with what's most convenient, which is the YouTube stream. And the band gets paid a fraction of a penny every time that's streamed. That's not a model for sustaining creators and artists. And people like Jack White or Radiohead or Taylor Swift, the bigger you are, the less that, the less that's going to affect your total bottom line. But it means it's that much harder for someone to actually get to that status of being a worldwide, world famous musician or artist. The bar keeps on getting raised without any real additional tool to make it to get people compensated for it, I think. So
turning back to your personal collection, what are some of your prized jewels?
There is a there's a White Stripes record. It's a copy of their second single with hand painted artwork on red and white swirled vinyl, which there's only 15 copies in that series that were done. They were hand painted because the sleeves weren't printed yet by the time the record release show happened. So Jack and the owner of the label, Dave Buick, who's kind of one of my mentors in running a record label, he taught me a lot. They hand painted 15 covers. And I actually ran the merch table that night. So I sold them all. I bought one for myself for $6. That was what we were selling them for in 1998. And it's become a very, very highly sought after piece of memorabilia in the White Stripes Jack White world, to the point where I've been contacted many times by people looking for copies to buy. And since I was once I was the person running the merch table that night, I know where a lot of them ended up. And so
you still remember where they ended up. You're like, oh, that you were the guy in the Yola Tango T-shirt.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of Yola Tango T-shirts that night, to be honest. But so of the 15 that were made, I can accurately account for 13 of them and tell you where their locations are to this day. And I can also tell you every time they've changed hands and for what amount they changed hands for. To the tune of as high as the first one that ever sold outside of the Gold Dollar, which is the club where the record release show was. Someone sold one for $800 in 2003 or so. And the highest price ever paid for one, I think one ended up going for $21,000 in the past couple years.
It's like the Honus Wagner baseball card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you've got one of those.
I've got one of those, only one. That's I think just for being there when all of that happened, when the sleeves were being painted, when the records were being sold, and being with the White Stripes through their entire career, that while a very rare and expensive piece, it also is a bit of sentimentality to it.
Precious memento, yeah. And
yeah,
what are you looking for? What's a record that you would love to find in a bin or for sale today?
I think the top one at this point is there's a record by a band called Spaced, and it's the songs are, it's a 7-inch 45, and the songs are "Ain't That the Way It Is, Baby" and "Flying Through the Sky," and it's just a weird. It's kind of post garage, but not really psychedelic. Maybe a little bit of Led Zeppelin influence to it. One copy sold on eBay in 2007, and I was the second highest bidder, and I lost it. Ended up going for like $530. And I've never seen a second copy for sale. I know Greg Kostelich at Get Hip Records in Pittsburgh owns a copy, and I'm pretty sure Craig Moore Records by Mail had one for sale on their website at some point, because it's listed as out of stock on there. So as far as I can tell, 3 known copies, one of which I'm not even sure where it would be. And there's no information on the label to actually figure out where this band would be from. The one that sold on eBay in 2007 turned up in St. Joseph's, Michigan. And there's so it says there's no label name listed, so it just says Spaced, the song titles, and then the names under the song titles are Gypsy, Ape, Skin, and Chuckles. Those are the names. That's all the information listed on the record, and I think there might be a customary release number like A101 or something like that. So no one seems to know anything about this band. I really love records from Detroit and Michigan, so because a copy was found in St. Joseph's, I like to believe that it's a Michigan record. But I would happily pay, if anyone's holding a copy, I would be willing to offer more than the $530 the original copy on eBay sold.
Or an awesome trade. I mean, you're a guy in a position to be able to help, let's talk collectors to collectors. What can we do?
Yes, I can trade some shit, man. But I just, when I recently found out that Greg at Get Hip had one, I said, what do you, name what you want, what you're looking for, name your price. And he's a collector as crazy as I am. And he had no desire to let go of it, of which I completely understand. So that's one that, that's probably at the top of the list since I didn't get that a copy. And it's been pirated. It's been bootlegged. So you can find, I've got a copy of the bootleg version of it, but I need the original because of that, compulsion that your listeners are probably very well aware of.
Have you ever not sold a record to somebody because you don't feel comfortable with them owning it?
No. I've not really sold many records, to be honest.
How many do you have?
I'm probably, like we were talking about earlier, my main focus is 45s, and I'm probably I feel like for a few years I've been saying 5,000 to 6,000 7-inches, but I've not slowed down buying at all. So I think 5 to 6 is probably now 6 to 7 thousand 7-inches, and maybe like 2,000 LPs. I hope 2,000. I hope not more. They grow. I've got a pile spidering out from my desk of everything that I've listened to in the past couple months, and it's probably a good 4 feet of 12 inches that I've listened to. And just, storage and shelving becomes an issue in the home life.
And insurance and just cataloging and everything. Do you, how many hours a day do you listen to music?
It varies. I try to always be listening to music when I'm at my desk. That might be coming from my computer, but it can just as easily be coming from the turntable that's right next to it. And at home, not as much, but mainly because by the time I get home at 5 o'clock, I'm just happy to sit down and spend time with my daughter. If I can get her to get singing songs and listening to records with me, that's always a very, very touching moment.
You got her working the turntable yet?
No, not yet. I don't trust her that much.
Okay. We've got our boys that we've taught to flip the record. They don't touch the blue notes, but they will, hey, Daddy better get that one. But we actually have a filing system. We have different color sleeves. So if it's red, the kids don't touch. Anything outside of that, then it's cool for them to go ahead and go in and play. Because records should be played.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what better time to play them than when you're a kid and your brain's coming together. And my 7-year-old, well, when he was 6, he told his kindergarten class at home, we listened to John Coltrane. So, I think good taste starts young. But
absolutely.
Anyway, Ben, it's been an incredible conversation. Thank you very much for for spending time with us and for all the work you do in all your various capacities, all your different hats that you have on. I think you really are living the dream, and the fact that you and the Third Man team and the folks at Cass Records keep pushing the envelope and broadening the possibilities of vinyl records. It really is inspirational to us. So definitely want to thank you for that.
Well, those are very, very kind words. I sincerely appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks again, Ben.
Take care.